Okay, so in this video, we'll talk about creating line charts. We'll do a lot of different examples of line charts and different data sets we could use with line charts and how it actually works out. So let's start with this. So basically we have this little table. We have our different products and year-to-year production of those. So we want to put this on a chart so that we can compare them year to year. I'm gonna go ahead and select this. So most of the time when you create a line chart, you're gonna have x-axis and y-axis. So on x-axis, most of the time it's gonna be some sort of time series. So something like year to year. And on y-axis, you're gonna have whatever it's gonna be. So if you have a single thing, let's say apples year to year, and you want to chart that, I can just select this, just apples and year to year data, and then I'll go insert and chart, and it went with a column chart. So we'll have to go back and change it. So we'll go here, chart type, line chart. Make this a little smaller. So this is not probably what I'm looking for. It doesn't make any sense. We thought it's going to show our apples production over time, but it doesn't. So the reason for it is because the proper way of setting up your data for a line chart would be to have years on the left in column A and to have these different product types on top. But since we didn't do that, we have our option number 2. So for whatever reason, maybe because your company lays out the data this way and you have to use that data to make a chart, you don't want to shift that column and row positioning. So your plan B would be to go under this data tab, scroll all the way down and click switch rows and columns. And now it will do our year to year, and that's our production. So now let's try to make this chart, I guess, a little better. We'll just move this to the side. So you can see the production on the left starts from 35,000 and it goes to 50,000. So that's nice. If you want these numbers to have some sort of comma separator or have some sort of different formatting, you have to change the format of your data. So you would have to change the format of the numbers here. Back here and choose like a number formatting, you can see how that will reflect also in your chart over here. Now, if you didn't want the decimal points, you will again just go here and decrease your decimal points because you have whole numbers here. So that will reflect in your chart. Another thing we may want to do, it starts from 35,000, but we may want to have that start at a different point. So we can click on this axis on the left, and on the right, we can go ahead and set a minimum value. If I start from 0 instead of starting from 3,500, which is automatic, that chart would start looking like this. Depending on what you're looking for, one might be better than the other, so you'll have to figure out what is the best starting point. So I have a different video that goes through all of these little customizations that are available. You can watch that video if you really want to dig deeper into all of these customizations. That video is called Advanced Charts. I'm just gonna cover main things we may want to do in a line chart and go forward. Now, the second thing here is that the years right now, it's 2014, then 2014 and a half, then 2015, then 2015 and a half, then 2016. Well, we probably don't want those halves, do we? So I'm gonna click on that, scroll down, and for this, now it's doing those halves is because this grid has all of these lines in the middle, and those lines force it to do those halves. So if I go all the way down and choose my horizontal axis, which is what I have there, right? And I'm gonna go under grid lines. So under grid line, this is my horizontal axis. So I'll switch to horizontal axis, scroll down and change the major grid line count from auto to, that would be appropriate. So 1, 2, 3, 2014, 2015, 2016. That seems to be a lot more reasonable right now. Now you might still want those lines in the middle, but you just don't want numbers. So in that case, you can create minor grid line. So here it's none. So if I add one, it will split it into two. It will still look like the same, like this grid, but now we don't have to look at each one of those halves in the middle. Hopefully that makes sense. We can obviously also add a title to the chart by scrolling up to the top, chart titles, and as a title, we'll do year to year production. There it is. We can center this, maybe make it bold, and change the color. So that's our Apple production year to year. In addition, you may want to also specify what these numbers are. This is what, 10,000 pounds, 10,000 apples, or what is this? So if you click here on the left, you have your titles. So I'm going to go under chart axis and titles, and the chart title is this main title. Now what I want to do a vertical axis is this. So I'm going to do a vertical axis title, and I'll just type the title. So this will be my production in pounds. So this way it will be more understandable what this is. This is, I guess, pretty self-explanatory based on our title. So we're good. So I'm going to remove this chart, and I'm going to create a new one. This time I want to have a comparison between apples, oranges, bananas, and tomatoes year to year. So I'm simply going to select this, insert chart, and again I'm going to switch it to a line chart, and I have to switch my rows and columns all over again. Here we go. Now we have our apples, oranges, bananas, tomatoes. For this to work this way, you have to make sure that your years are either at top, or your years would be in the first column on the left if your data is flipped on the other side. So we'll see an example of that. Right now we have my apples, oranges, bananas, tomatoes. So I can do the same things. I can go here and change the axis. I can change the title. I can change this. And if I want to move this from here, maybe put it on top here, I'll click on it, go here under position, and put it on top. That should do it. Delete that. Okay, so I'm going to move to a different tab for a different data set. Let's go to this one. Great. So let's take a look at what we have. So basically we have our stock prices for Google stock. So we would like to put this on a chart to see the stock over time. So again, so now this data is positioned very well for a line chart because our dates or time series, whatever you want to call them, are in the first column right here. And then we have all different things we might want to plot located to the right. So I'm going to go under insert and chart, and it creates this line chart for us. So what it did, it created this line chart, and it placed open, high, low, and close on this line chart. So as you can see, it ignored the volume altogether because it looked at these numbers compared to all of these numbers, and they're just too large of numbers to go with these numbers. So it didn't use them, but it doesn't matter. We're going to customize it the way we like it anyways. So right now we have open, high, low, and close on our chart. We can see all of them over time. This gives us the price, and this is the dates. So the first thing I'm going to do, first of all, I don't want open, high, low. I just want the closing price. So I'm going to go under data. I'm going to go here under series. Open, I don't want, so I'm going to remove that. High, I don't want, I'm going to remove that. Low, I'm going to remove that as well. So that gives us our closing price over time. Looking good to me. Now, there are some things I probably want to do though here. So the first thing is I want these numbers to show up as dollar amounts. Well, the way you do that, you actually go and modify the actual numbers in the back. So these are the dates. So the dollar amounts are coming from the closing price because that's what I left. So if I want these to be dollar amounts, I have to format this column as currency. So I'll just go ahead and format as currency, and there we have it. dollar amounts on the left. Now, the same way, we probably don't like this crazy dates that we see over here. So we would like that to look like, well, this is pretty much the past year, starting from the first 2017 to the end of 2017. So basically that's month to month data for a year. So again, what we have to do, we have to go back and format the date. So if we go and change the formatting of our dates here, so if I go format number and choose some sort of formatting, the regular date formatting, see it will change to this formatting. But we want this to be a little more prettier, so I'm gonna go under format number, and what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go under more formats, and I'm gonna do a custom number format. So this is the current format. It says MDYYYY, 4-digit year. So if I simply just do MM, see, it gives a sample what it's gonna look like. So right now MM would be 05. Now if I do a third M, see, that's May. That's basically the short version of a month. That looks good to me. So if I wanted the year as well, I could do YY for 2-digit year, or if I want a full year, I would do something like this. So if I hit apply, that's our, see, March 2017, May 2017, July. But since this data is all in 2017, I'm not going to have 2017 here at all. So why don't we just look at months only? So I'm going to go format, number, I'll go more formats, custom number format, and I'll simply remove the year in formatting and just keep the name of the month. So I hit apply, so that gives us the name. So the dates are still there, right? If you look here, see on top, but the formatting, we've changed it to just say January, February, and so on. So there we are. Now we see this is March, this is May, this is July, this is September, this is November. Now it would be nice to have the full proper year with 12 month kind of period, so we can see each month. So how are we going to do that? Well, again, the way that these things are positioned, why this is March, May, July right here, is because of these grid lines. Because the major grid lines are drawn here, it puts the actual labels for each grid line. If we want to change those, we're going to have to change our grid lines. So if I go under grid lines, and I'm going to switch it to my horizontal axis, which is this one, scroll down, I'm going to change the count. So how many do we want for this to work? I assume if we do 12, that would be fine. So I'm going to type 12, hit enter. So you can see how it worked out. So January, it starts here. So it's not going to put it here because it starts there. Then we have February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. That looks really good. So right now this says date. I don't see the point of that. I think anybody looking at this can see what this is. So I want to remove this. And this is going to be my horizontal. So if I click on it, it usually selects it right away. And that's going to be in my chart and axis title section. And I don't want that to show up. So I'm just going to erase that date, hit enter, and now it's gone. So now it just shows the month. And again, also on top, this is the title. We'll probably give it a different title. We'll say Google stock price in 2017. So that will also indicate that this 2017, easy to understand for a user. If they're looking at this chart, again, you can make it bold. You can color it differently. You can change the size. You can do whatever you want. So these are like basic things you can modify, which again, I did talk about in a separate video. Just watch that. It will cover a lot of it. On the left, if I have this number, see, it goes by 100. That looks good. But if we wanted to change that and go by a 50 or something like that, you again will have to modify, because this go by the grid line. You go by the grid line. Only this time it's going to be vertical axis, and you change the grid line. But I like this 100, so I don't want to change it. But I may want to do another line here so I can see where the 50 line is. So for that, I'll do a minor grid line. So minor good line means I don't put another number here, but I still draw the line so I can see where it is. So also this close on the right now, it doesn't make any sense. So this is our price over time. We'll go ahead and remove that. So I'm going to click on it. In position right, I'm going to do none. And that should be our chart. If you wanted to also start this from a lower value than 800, obviously you go click on this and change the minimum value for that axis. So if you wanted to start this from 0. In addition to all of this, one extra thing I'm going to add is a trend line. I want to see what is the linear trend line that we have with this data. So for that, I'll go under my series. So the series is the actual line. You can think about it that way. And here I'm going to simply just scroll down. We could obviously here in series see that's the close, which is this blue line. Change the color, make it look different. But what I'm looking for is this thing that's called a trend line, which is going to show us the trend based on the data we have here. So that's our linear trend line right here. That's or the line of best fit, I guess that's what we call it. So we can also change the color for our trend line. So probably change it to a different color right now, and I'll make it 1 pixel thick and maybe make it a little more visible. So that looks really good. We can also add a label if we wanted to. So we can do custom and type something, trend over time or something. But I really don't want it, so I'm going to take this and position none. Now, what I want to do, I want to create another chart, which is going to be a little more complex, but not by much. It's going to be pretty much the same thing, but a little different. So I'll go ahead and take this data and create another chart. It starts from the same place. Now, because I already did format the data in the background, it's taking some of that formatting. Now, again, I'm going to remove the low, high, open. Interesting, we don't have the close, but that doesn't matter. We can add it ourselves. So I'm going to click this thing, and I'm going to start from the top and Control Shift down to select the whole column. Hit OK. So that I'm going to do Control Up to get back, so you can see how we drew the same thing, close over time. Now what I'm going to do, edit this chart, I'm going to add another series, and this one is going to be the volume. So I'm going to click here, Control Shift down, OK, Control Up. So now I have those two things on my chart. So the red one is the volume, and the blue one is the close price. Remember, the close was this. We saw it was growing. The problem is that the volume of trade is completely different measurement than the price. So this is a huge number compared to this. And for that reason, the numbers are so small that it basically looks like one straight line compared to this. So because the measurements are different for those two lines, you're going to have to move one of those lines to a different axis. And the way you do it, you go under your customize, you go under series, and here, see, there's all series, which is basically all lines, but we want to shift this to one of those. So we'll move to volume. So volume is the red line. And here the axis says left, so I'm going to move it to right. So now we move that to its own axis on the right. Now this thing doesn't make sense over here. Maybe we'll put it on top. So I'm going to click here, position, put it on top, just like that. Maybe make it a little smaller. Price versus trade volume. The red one is our trade volume. Again, you can format this, make it prettier. So now, however, we can compare these two. This is the price of the stock, the blue one, it goes up, and this is the volume of trade. So you can look and see if there is any correlation between trade volume and prices of the stock going up or going down. So for example, here we have this pick volume, and at the same time we can see how the price of the stock went down. So that could be like there was a huge sell-off of the stock here, and that's why the prices went down. Again, if you want your months to be here, you're gonna have to modify your grid line. So you go here, grid lines, and we're gonna do our horizontal axis. So see, now we have right vertical axis, and horizontal axis, because this is the right vertical axis. We want our horizontal axis, so there we are, and then you can switch your major grid line to whatever you want it to be. In this case, I'm gonna do 12 again. So here we go, that's that, and this we probably don't need, so I'm gonna get rid of that. And maybe add in 2017 here so it's clear. So there it is, that's our line chart. And you can see how when we have an entire date series like this, we have 252 records, we can actually just take all of those and plot it on the chart. Now the last thing you may want to do, sometimes you may feel like this type of chart has all these like pointy edges. You can switch the type under chart style. You can make it smooth. So see, if you pay attention right now, it's very pointy edges here. If I do smooth, it's gonna smooth out those edges. It's still gonna go through lines. So that's gonna be that type if you like that better. So that's our stock price over time versus the volume of trade. Okay, moving on to another example. Here we have this Whole Foods income statement, and this is the numbers in millions. That's our year-to-year values, and this is different things: the revenue, gross profit, number of stores, and all this type of information. So we may want to analyze the revenue versus gross profit. For that, I'm just gonna go ahead and select this like this. I'm not selecting the rest, I just want the revenue, gross profit, and the years. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit insert, chart. There it is. We have the revenue, we have our gross profit, whatever that is, right? So again, if you don't want those zeros in the end, you would have to reformat this data and cut some decimal points. That's gonna look like this. And we have our revenue and we have our gross profit. Now we can see them side by side. Now it's interesting that sometimes when you have something like this, you may want to change the axis for one of those. Even though it's the same measurement, so both of them are dollar amounts, you may get a little better comparison if you, let me change this to VS gross profit. I'm gonna center that. So I'm gonna move one of those to its own axis for you to show what's going on. So I'm gonna click on it. It usually selects it right away here, and I'm gonna move it to the right axis. So what happens now, the gross profit has its own axis and revenue has its own axis on the left. But now it's a little easier to compare those two when we look at it side by side. So you can see the blue line is our revenue. We can see how our revenue, it grows year to year. It grew starting from 2013. It went higher and higher until 2017. But at the same time, if we look at our gross profit starting 2015, it didn't grow. It actually goes down. That's looking good. Now I'm gonna move this to the side. Let's do a little different analysis on this. We can see how our revenue is growing, so we're selling more and more every year. Now we want to know, is it because we're selling more product in our stores, or is it because we're just adding more and more stores? Because if you look number of stores from year to year for Whole Foods, it's just growing because we're opening more and more Whole Foods locations. So we want to know, is the number growing simply because we're adding new locations, or we're actually making more sales in each individual store? So to do this, we'll create another metric here, and that will be revenue per store. And what we're gonna do, we'll just do an equal sign. We'll take the revenue for that year and divide it by the number of stores And that's going to be the revenue. And remember, that's in millions, right? And I'm going to just copy that formula to the right. I probably need to add some decimal points here on this number. So that's our revenue per store. So you can see how in 2013, each store actually had more revenue than they have now. Although the total revenue is growing, but that's just due to adding more stores, not because we're selling more. That's something we may want to also illustrate on our chart. So I'm going to select this, insert chart. So that's this. So that's not what I wanted. I wanted to be flipped. I wanted year to year here, which means I'm going to scroll down and switch rows and columns. And then I'm going to start removing all the things I don't want. So I don't want the revenue. I don't want gross profit, operating income. So most of this are not going to be here. And I also want to make sure this is a line chart. That's our revenue per store. The other thing I want to do, maybe also create an average line to show what was the average per store over these years. So to do that, I'm going to go back to my data. I'm going to leave this alone and create average revenue per store. And then I'll create an average function and do the average of all of these years. Now I want that average to repeat for each one of those, which means I'm going to lock that range of the average, close this. And I did lock that, by the way, by pressing F4. I'm going to hit enter. That's going to do this. Now I'm going to move this to the right. So that's our average for all of these years combined. That's the average for all those years. So now, see, it automatically actually did add that line right away. If you had a problem by adding it automatically, then you would click Edit Chart, scroll here and Add Series, and select from here going to the right like this. But in this case, it did a great job just adding, so I don't have to do it. So Edit, I'm going to customize, and I'm going to go under Series. I'm going to pick that red line and maybe color it something different and make it a different thickness line. So that's our average revenue per store. That's in green. And this is our revenue per store over time. This here doesn't make a lot of sense. So maybe put it below or maybe put it above. I'll try that. Position bottom. And we also want to add a title on top for this chart. So I'll go ahead and scroll up, chart title. So I'll call this revenue per store over time or year to year. Make the formatting and all of that. And finally, I want to make sure that I indicate that these numbers on the left are in millions. And for that, I'm going to add another title, only that's going to be our vertical axis title because this is our vertical axis. So vertical axis title, and I'll say sales in millions. And there we go. That shows us our sales in millions, and that's our average line for our sales. And we can see how we crossed that average line after 2015. In 2016, we're below it, and it's trending down. So let's put this on the side. I'm going to go ahead and do this. That's my revenue year to year. I'm not comparing it to anything, just to see the revenue year to year. So chart, that's our line chart, shows us over time. So it did a pretty good job just doing the whole thing. So revenue, this doesn't need to be here anymore. Or maybe it does. We'll find out. And finally, maybe put this in the middle. Make it bold. Maybe change the color. whatever it is you have to do. What I want to do is show the trend line for our sales. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my series over here, and that's the revenue. So I want to make sure I have it selected. So if you have multiple lines, be careful, make sure you have it selected. Otherwise you're doing it for all of them. And then I'm going to scroll down and do my trend line. And that's my trend line. We can make it, scroll down here and choose this color. And that's my color for my trend line. Again, you'll have to select whatever it is you have to do. Now, because I did add this trend line, which is the best fit line again, I may want to show people that this is the trend line and this is the revenue. So for that, I have to now add my legend back. So I'll go ahead here and do a position. So I can put it on top. Now that just adds the revenue. Now that's the trend line is the next thing we want to do. So again, I'm going to click on that trend line. I'm going to select it in my series, scroll down. See, that's my trend line. Now all I'm going to do is here the label. I'm just going to go ahead and add a label. So I'll do custom, and there we go. It automatically did trend line for revenue. If you wanted to kind of make a projection based on this trend line, you could also just go forward with your chart. So right now we go from 2013 to 2017, right? So based on this trend line, we may want to anticipate our sales in 2018, for example, or 2019. So for that, I'm going to click on this axis that goes from 2013 through 2017. And the maximum value that's now automatic, I'm going to change it to 2019. And that's my now new chart with my trend line going this way. Now again, see this doesn't fit for 2019 because according to this trend line, based on the numbers we have right now, it should go way up here. So for that, we have to also change this axis. So right now it's at 17,000 that we have. So we're going to change our maximum value. I'm going to try 20,000, but 18,000 looks solid to me. So there we go. So that shows that by 2019, if we continue with the current trend, which is really like linear trend, so that may or may not be a correct trend to look for this, because it seems like while the growth was really fast from 2013 to 2015, it's not as fast from 2015 through 2017. So it's probably not going to go linear like that. Let's assume that way. Based on that trend, it's going to be like 18,000. So that's in millions, basically. So that's, I guess, 18 billion. Now, if we just want to make this projection for 1 year, instead of going until 2019, you would have done 2018. And then you probably don't need to go this high. Anyways, that looks pretty good to me. That should cover most types of line charts. Basically, we have one value that goes on our X axis and one or more values that can go in our Y axis. Most commonly, your X is going to be a date or time series, but it doesn't have to be. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.